Talks at Google. I am Ambarish Kenghe and I'll be your host today. We have the pleasure of having a very special guest today, Kiran Mazumdar-Shaw. Now, she needs no introduction, but I'll give you a quick recap. She's the chairperson of Biocon, is a pioneering biotech entrepreneur, a healthcare visionary, a global influencer, and a passionate philanthropist. The impact she has made as a leading woman in science has made her role model globally. She is committed to equitable access to healthcare through affordable innovation as she pursues a path of making a difference to billions of lives globally. During COVID, she has been championing the cause of healthcare industry in finding innovative solutions to combat the pandemic. She is the recipient of two of India's highest civilian honors, the Padma Shri and Padma Bhushan. Most recently, she has been confirmed with EY World Entrepreneur of the Year 2020 award, which is a testimony to her entrepreneurial journey of over 4 decades. She has also been appointed as the Vice Chair of the U.S. India Business Council in 2021. She has many other international accolades as well to her credit, including the Order of Australia, which is Australia's highest civilian honor. She got in 2020, the highest French distinction, Knight of Legion of Honor in 2016, and Othmel Gold Award 2014. She serves on the board of MIT, Pure Tech Health, Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center, Infosys, Narayana Health, and various other key industry, educational, government, and professional bodies globally. Mrs. Shaw, a really privileged and it's an honor. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ambarish. It's a great pleasure, and I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your time today. And I wanted to start the conversation with something very personal, if you don't mind. I was wondering, like, people know so much about you and they talk about Biocon, everything you've done with vaccines, everything in biotechnology. But can you tell us a little bit about things personal to you that people may not know about?
Well, I'm sure those of you who have read about me know that I started off life as a brewmaster. And those of you who haven't, then, well, maybe this is something that people don't know about. I started off my journey in my entrepreneurial realm as a brewmaster. And because I didn't get a job as a brewer, I decided to start a biotech company instead. Apart from my brewing interests, I would also like to share with you that I'm a great art lover. I enjoy classical music, both Western and Hindustani. In fact, I myself am a trained Hindustani classical singer. Of course, I have a huge art collection, which I'm very proud of, and I support many, many art initiatives in the city and beyond. And of course, I'm very deeply interested in science, research, and of course, I support many startups in the biotech space. So I think that should give you, an overall kind of flavor of what interests me. I am very interested in tech. I think technology has a huge role to play in really bringing about transformative change in every possible realm that we are looking at. And certainly health sciences and healthcare is no different. I really believe health equity can be delivered by technology. And that's something I'm very passionate about, both as a business philosophy and through my philanthropy. Because I really believe that health equity is something that gives me that kind of raison d'etre and that sort of sense of business purpose to really drive my agenda of, providing affordable access to the kind of drugs and medicines that we produce for patients anywhere and everywhere in the world. Because I really believe that is what really gave me the impetus to start my own business agenda.
That is so cool. Actually, I read through your Wikipedia page and I knew about the brewmaster story, but I didn't know about classical music and you being a trained classical musician. So there we go. We have something very new that people won't probably read as much about, even if they researched you. So thank you so much for that. If we sort of come back to Biocon, we know about sort of the whole brewmaster story, and you gave us a little bit of a sneak peek into how that might have started, and talk about pivoting. Startups talk about pivoting, and this seems like the biggest pivot of all that anybody may have heard of. Could you tell us a little bit more about the Biocon journey, how it started, and where it is now?
In fact, Ambarish, I very often pride myself in being the first tech startup in the country because, as I mentioned to you, I returned to India as a highly qualified brewmaster. I couldn't get a job as a brewer because of a huge gender bias. And it was that which really made me turn to setting up my own business. And obviously, I call myself an accidental entrepreneur because I had never planned to be an entrepreneur. But because I got rejected by an industry that I was keen to serve, that I decided to create my own job. And that job happened to be a biotech startup in 1978. At a time when nobody had heard of tech startups, I was a little ahead of even the Infosys startup story, a few years ahead of them, because I decided that, it was very exciting to set up a biotech company, although I knew it was going to be very challenging because in the late 70s, as you can imagine, India was at the height of the license Raj. It was, impoverished as an economy. And if you remember, we had huge import and export challenges. So it was during that time that I foolishly set up a biotech startup, which was very dependent on imports of very important biotech, research materials, which I found it very difficult to import, but I somehow managed. Those days, we couldn't even import equipment and research equipment with which to do high-end research, but somehow I managed it, and we were very resourceful in the way we deployed many of the instruments that we could import. And I really started off in my garage. The proverbial garage was also one part of my startup story. Um, I just had a dream to set up a biotech company, and those days I was thinking of making enzymes because enzyme technologies were something very new to everyone. Nobody even realized why enzymes are important. But as someone who had studied a lot about enzymes in my brewing days, I knew that this was an exciting technology and something that lent itself to what I had studied. Therefore, I decided to get into industrial enzymes because I realized that, you know, um, industry was polluting the world with chemical technologies and chemical processes. And I felt, wow, this is such a cool way of reducing that pollution by replacing chemical technologies with enzyme technologies that were really green technologies. Of course, it was an idea way ahead of its time because it wasn't the time when climate change was fashionable or that people were even worried about environmental sustainability. In fact, I had a huge challenge because when I was trying to develop my company and market enzymes, people thought I was crazy. People didn't even care whether there were enzyme technologies available. In fact, they would just say that, why should I use enzymes? I mean, these chemicals are cheap. I don't have a pollution problem because I'm allowed to discharge my effluent wherever I want to. And you are telling me that my effluent will be very non-polluting, but how does it matter to me? Because why should I change my process? Why should I try and invest, in improving my process or doing something when my present process works perfectly well? So it was tough, but then I knew that there were many companies who bought into what I did. And therefore, very slowly but surely, I started developing the business. And it, of course, for the first 20 years of my entrepreneurial journey, I was only developing and marketing enzymes globally. So, although I had started in India, my markets were global. So, I thought globally from day one. I thought about innovation from day one because I had to develop novel enzyme systems and novel enzymes. And so I was very focused on innovation, novelty, addressing certain unmet needs. And of course, trying to be very transformational about industrial processes. So if you can think about it, it was truly a very exciting technology which drove me to do more. And it was really a research-led company. And I remember when I started Biocon in 1978, I said to myself, I want this company to be a research led company. I want it to be a company which attracts a large number of scientists because I felt scientists' jobs are very important. And I also wanted it to be a place where women would find it very exciting to work. So I had all these aspirations and goals. And when I reflect back on what we achieved, I think we did quite a lot during the first 20 years. We actually developed a large number of proprietary enzyme technologies. I was marketing my enzymes throughout the world. I had a very strong partnership with an Irish biotech company who actually was the reason I started Biocon. And the Irish biotech company got acquired by Unilever 10 years into my partnership with them. And then I had a very strong relationship with Unilever, who taught me a lot. They helped me to professionalize very rapidly, and I was catering to a lot of the Unilever needs as well within such a large conglomerate. So it allowed me to basically understand what industry was about, what scaling up was about, what IP was all about, because it was Unilever who made me realize the worth of what I was doing. I had not valued my patents or the intellectual property I had created. I just took it for granted. But it was Unilever who made me understand how valuable it was. And then, of course, 20 years into the enzyme journey, as a typical entrepreneur, decided to reinvent myself. And I said, why am I only making enzymes? I think this is a question that every entrepreneur must ask regularly, saying, am I doing the right thing? Am I going to start becoming too cliched? Am I going to lose opportunities of growth, which I should be looking at every moment of my entrepreneurial journey? So that was the time I said to myself, why can't I leverage these technologies to do something beyond enzymes? And that beyond enzymes became biopharmaceuticals, because I felt that I had a lot of very interesting technologies that I developed for enzymes. And if you're agnostic to the fact that an enzyme is a protein and so is a biopharmaceutical a protein, then I felt I could leverage many of these technologies to do something more. And that's how I started my journey of biopharmaceuticals in 1998, when I decided to pivot my business from enzymes to biopharmaceuticals. And again, I needed a reason and a business purpose of what would drive me. And that business purpose started being that I found that most people in the developing world had little or no access to very important life saving and essential biopharmaceuticals, starting with insulin. India was at the epicenter of insulin, of diabetes, and we were importing all our insulins. And not just that, because we couldn't afford recombinant human insulin, we were using animal insulins, which were actually so immunogenic, because that was cheaper than recombinant human insulin. So I said, wow, I've got to change this. I've got to somehow make recombinant human insulin using biotechnology available to patients in India. And that's how I then leveraged one of my very proprietary yeast technologies to develop insulin. And Ambarish will be very interested to know that even though most people told me, listen, you're taking a big risk because you're using a proprietary yeast technology, your competitors in the insulin space are using other technologies. If you don't copy them, you will have a huge problem, because from a regulatory point of view, they feel much more comfortable if you use the same platform. And I said, no, science has to speak. Science has to be rational. I don't want to copy somebody else's technology. I want to use my own proprietary technology if I can. And so with that, I started developing insulins using my proprietary technology. And I'm absolutely thrilled that 20 years later, the US FDA gave me the first interchangeable label in the world for my insulin. Now that actually proved the point that it's about high science. It's about your belief that proprietary technologies should be leveraged for other things. And so today we are the only company in the world with an interchangeable insulin that we developed 20 years ago. Of course, it's not just recombinant human insulin. What got the interchangeable label was an insulin analog, which I used from the same platform. So I have a very interesting focus on insulins because I knew diabetes was at the heart of the problem globally, and I wanted affordable access to insulins for patients all over the world. And that's what I'm really committed to in terms of insulin technology. Then I realized that there were biologics like monoclonal antibodies, which again were beyond the reach of most patients in India. Again, these were being used extensively for cancer. And so I started developing antibodies for cancer. And I'm really happy that, again, we've become globally known for not just our biosimilars, but also for some novel antibodies that are being tried in autoimmune diseases. And, I even licensed that particular molecule to a US company who is doing some very exciting path-breaking trials for what we call as graft versus host disease. This is what happens when transplant patients receive a graft or an organ from a donor. Then what happens is that the body rejects it very often because it's considered to be a foreign entity. But by giving our drug, you actually prevent that rejection. So I think this is a very interesting area for us to focus on. Many other such, indications have been discussed and are being developed. But we also use that same drug during COVID to treat what they call as cytokine release, which was causing deaths in many parts of the world. So in India, it came to the rescue of thousands of patients. We actually treated 50,000 patients who benefited from this drug since the first wave. So I think, it's very exciting to be in biosciences today. Biotech is the place to be in today. It's absolutely cool to be in biotech. And I think there's so much to be done because there are a large number of viral diseases that can be solved using biotech, both antibodies and vaccines. There is so much of unmet need in cancer and autoimmune diseases, which biopharmaceuticals are addressing. And I think it's a very exciting time as a scientist to really be operating in this space. So that's how I've been pivoting my business from, enzymes for 20 years to now biopharmaceuticals for the last 20 years. And, I'm also looking at other areas to pivot into because there's so much happening in life sciences.
That is such a cool. I knew bits and pieces of this, but I didn't know this whole journey. So really, really cool to hear about it, from a brewmaster to industrial enzymes to biotech, diabetes, cancer, and COVID and more. So that's quite phenomenal. Now, one thing that you talk a lot about is not just innovation, but affordable innovation. One of the things we want to talk about today is compassionate capitalism, and your philosophy to philanthropy is a bit different from what I've heard. Could you talk a bit more about how you think about affordable innovation and philanthropy?
So, if you look at my business philosophy, it is about affordable access, and affordable access can only be delivered through affordable innovation. So, unless I develop products using some very efficient platforms that deliver very affordable products at the end of the day, and unless I've also invested a lot in global scale because economies of scale also deliver affordability. So when my whole, business focus or business purpose has been about providing affordable access to our drugs and medicines, then obviously it comes from a deep sense of purpose, which is about my philanthropy. What do I want to do with my philanthropy? I want to make social impact, which is inclusive, where I am able to basically, bring in marginalized people into the mainstream. I mean, that's really what drives me. Whether it is healthcare, whether it is education, whether it is entrepreneurial opportunities, I really want to use my philanthropy to make sure that marginalized people come into the mainstream, really through a process of self help and education. That's what I call compassionate capitalism, because it is only when you give people opportunities of employment, of entrepreneurship, of economic development, that you will see progress. I myself was a very, very frugal entrepreneur when I started. Okay, I had no money in the bank. I had 10,000 rupees in the bank. I only had a dream, but I was so committed to creating my own, economic independence. I didn't want to be dependent on anybody. You know, my father was also struggling at the time when I started my company, and all I wanted from my parents was moral support. I told them, I said, look, I don't expect any financial support from you because I know you can't give it, but I want your moral support. My father was my biggest supporter, my late father. He used to tell me from the time I was a young girl, don't let gender come in the way of your dreams, he would say. Just go for it, Kiran, because you're so, capable and confident. Don't let anyone stop you in your tracks, because we are all there with you. I believe in you. I don't differentiate between you and your brothers just because you're a girl. Okay, just go for it. So he was my biggest supporter, and I built Biocon in front of his eyes. Of course, he didn't live to see all that I've done in recent times, but he at least saw me build the company up to a level which he was very, very proud of. He said, look what you've done. You've done so much with your own hands, and you've done it with a sense of conviction and confidence, which is what I'm very proud of. So this is the way, I built the company. Um, this is the way and my father was the one who basically told me, look, you must lift your own community and your society, because if you live in a poor community, then what's the point of being successful? You've got to make others also successful. And he was the one that told me that money is not a currency to buy favors. Money is a currency to make a difference. That is what really resonated with me all these years, saying, I want to be philanthropic with my money because I want to make a difference, to communities, to society, and I want to make social impact. So but that is not, and my father and I used to discuss very often, charity is not the answer. It's about enabling people. It's about empowering people. It's about giving people those opportunities which they don't have. That's how you empower people and make them, successful. So that's what I've been doing with my philanthropy, is, giving fellowships, giving research fellowships. I really believe research is very important, because without research, you really can't move the needle. So I give a lot of research fellowships around the world. I invest a lot in universities and upgrading those universities and creating new departments and giving scientists an opportunity to be more innovative. I, of course, invest a lot in technology-driven transformation. I have basically backed this digital primary health clinics, because I really feel a healthcare system needs a very strong and robust primary health system. And in India and many parts of the world, that's what really, sort of basically you know, does not allow us to be successful. And that's what lets us down, when we don't have a very strong primary health system. But to have a very strong primary health system, I really believe technology has to play a very important role. And so I've actually supported this huge initiative, which of course is also driven by our own CSR at Biocon, called Ilaj Digital Primary Health Care Clinics, where we use a lot of technology to capture medical data, to capture diagnostic data, and to help the primary healthcare doctor to manage patients better. And I think the health outcomes are so much better and improved, that I feel that we've really made a big difference to healthcare, especially in rural areas where they don't have access to better medical facilities or healthcare.
Right. It's very cool because you're talking about not just giving money away, but it's about that money leveraging itself many times over because it is creating impact that sort of lives on forever. So that's actually very cool to hear. You talked about, sorry, go ahead, Mr. Shaw.
No, no, I'm just saying there are many such initiatives. Like a lot of the cooperatives in India are great examples of compassionate capitalism. Ila Bhatt Seva or Amul or many of these initiatives, including, what Sadhguru is also trying to do in terms of making farmer producer organizations much more self-sustaining by basically addressing the huge challenge that we have in drying up rivers by planting really trees so that we attract back the rainforest and get the farmers to actually cultivate crops that allow them to be self-sustaining. I mean, there's so much that can be done in agriculture. I've been, studying the agriculture sector so intently because I suddenly realized that India is the biggest producers of fruit and vegetables in the world. I didn't know that we were the largest producers of gherkins and jalapenos and many of these very expensive foods that are sold at high prices uh, as exclusive foods, and they all come from here. We are now, one of the large producers. Obviously, we've been large producers of tea and coffee,
Yes.
and this year I know that Indian coffee is in huge demand because of COVID, where the Brazilian coffee has had a huge problem. So I think we need to really develop agriculture in our country, which is the largest economic sphere in our country, through technology more than anything else. Agri-tech is a big opportunity for India, but we have to do it right. So that's how I feel that, if you are philanthropic, it has to be using technology to bring about transformation, whether it's healthcare, education, or economic development.
No, that makes sense, and I think you referred multiple times to sort of teach a person how to fish. You're not just about giving away the fish, but teach them how to
And
fish.
Google itself is, such a well-known tech company that is also doing a lot in many of these areas.
Yep. No, we're at least aspiring to do it, and hopefully we can do more and more, especially in India. Definitely looking to do more. You during a couple of questions here, you talked about women and how women entrepreneurs could do a lot, and how sort of you couldn't become a brewmaster, and that's sort of a brutal story to hear. And I have a daughter who's listening to this right now. What's your message to women entrepreneurs? And I'm sure a lot of women are listening to this. Like, what's your message to them on how they can make a big difference to the lives of others in the country?
So, when I started my business in 1978, there were very few role models. We almost had to self-inspire ourselves. And we had to look at a few women who were doing great things, but it wasn't really about them. It was about believing in yourself. Today, I think women have a large number of role models and examples of how successful women can be. So they don't have an excuse of saying, it's tough or it's difficult because so many women have succeeded. So I want to tell every woman that it's up to you. You have to believe in your own capabilities, develop them, build them, and succeed. I think every woman has a huge opportunity because we are getting into a more or less a level playing field. It wasn't a level playing field up until now. Today, it's more a level playing field, and I think women have no excuse. I think women must look at themselves as big contributors to economic development. I think women, especially educated women, must use their education to contribute to the economic mainstream. And I think both professionally and entrepreneurially, I think women have large numbers of opportunities. I mean, even if you look at today, look at the number of women who have been involved in the vaccine development program around the world, or developing diagnostics, or developing, I mean, I don't know whether people know, but the mRNA technology came out of a woman who persevered with her research in University of Pennsylvania. A Hungarian woman, Professor Karikos, who really, or Karinka, I've forgotten her exact name, but she was the one who actually, persevered relentlessly on mRNA technology. And it was she and her guide, Dr. Weissman, who finally licensed this technology to both Moderna and to BioNTech. And what we are now beneficiaries of are because of her effort. So I think women are very, very strong scientists. They are very, very capable, committed, full of conviction. Women don't give up easily. And that's why it really makes me very disappointed when I see women giving up at the slightest challenge or roadblock that they perceive, because women have that strength to carry on. And I want women to basically make sure that they don't waste their education, especially if they're educated. I've seen so many rural women not giving up. And I don't see why urban women have to give up so easily. I even see it in the workplace. Today I find women are much more demanding and fussy about how they want their work to be treated than a woman who understands what the opportunity is all about. So I want women to understand they cannot ask for special favors because it is a level playing field. And I think there's enough policies and various kinds of opportunities for women to perform a very professional role in the workplace, a very entrepreneurial role. Yes, I think women do find it difficult to access capital, but even that is changing. I think capital access is much better than what it used to be. So I think things are improving, and it's unless you see more women in the workplace, more women in society who are successful, then you will really create an equal opportunity environment. I mean, even during, if you look at this year's Olympics,
Yes.
I think you will see women really doing well from India. Every woman who has gone out to compete in the Olympics has given it her best. And we are seeing women really perform very well and do our country proud. I really hope our country understands the role of women in every sphere, not just in sports, but also in uh, the economic development, in entrepreneurship, in science and research, arts and culture. I mean, you name it. I think there is no sphere where women are absent.
That's a that's great, great message for women, and of course, we've got three medals in the Olympics for India, at least I think, by women, and more hopefully coming. I want to change topics. You mentioned a bit about mRNA, as we were talking about it. Tell us more about vaccines. Like, is this, how do they really work? Just if you could give us a quick overview on mRNA versus DNA, and does it matter which one I get, and how these things work?
Yeah, so traditionally, vaccines actually have mimicked a very mild form of the virus. And so, what you tend to do is you basically either give an inactivated virus. So, it's like the Covaxin that we have in our country. You take the virus that is causing the disease, you kill it, and you basically mix it with an adjuvant so that it is immunogenic, but it basically has retained the protein that actually causes, like in this case, the spike protein. So it actually has the spike protein even though you've inactivated it. And so when you actually give the inactivated virus to the body recognizes the virus as a foreign body, launches an immune response, and actually makes the immune response even higher by adding what they call as an adjuvant, in this case alum, which then gets an immune response, and that's how you then create the immune response against the spike protein. In COVID, the spike protein is really the main antigen against which you want the antibody response. Now, then go to another platform, which is the viral vector platform. So, in a viral vector platform, what they do is that they take a harmless virus, like an adenovirus, which is like the common cold virus. They empty out the DNA that that virus has and insert the DNA which codes for the spike protein, which the COVID virus has. So, you actually introduce a harmless virus into your body, but it's actually got the spike protein that is produced by the COVID virus. And so again, your body launches an immune response because it actually sees a virus, and it always does. Even if it's a common cold, your body, of course, launches an immune response against adenovirus as well. But this time, it's also launching an immune response against the spike protein which this virus is carrying. So that's another type of a vaccine. And that is the Covishield type of vaccine or the Sputnik type of vaccine. Now you have a third type of vaccine, which is what is called as a subunit vaccine. So instead of actually giving the virus, the harmless virus, you can actually give the DNA that codes for that protein and couch it in a sort of adjuvant, you know, and or and give that as a concoction to the body. So the DNA comes out of that little concoction that you've given, that you've embedded it in, and then it forms that spike protein, and again the body launches an immune response against it. mRNA is the shortest cut. So what mRNA is that, when your DNA has to produce a protein, it actually harnesses what is called as the messenger RNA to convert it into a code, right? And so that code is what is conveyed to the mRNA is nothing but the code. And the code basically then codes for the spike protein. So that's the shortest way of producing the spike protein and get an immune response. So instead of waiting for a DNA to translate into mRNA and a mRNA then making the protein, here you just give the mRNA and the body is agnostic to where that mRNA has come from. So the mRNA is like a code and the body just carries out that code, right? So those are the mRNA vaccines, which also gives you a big immune response because it produces the spike protein in a large quantity for which the body then responds. Now, all these vaccines work. The problem is we don't know for how long these vaccines will protect you. So whether it is an mRNA, whether it is a viral vector vaccine, whether it is an inactivated virus, or whether it is a subunit vaccine, we really don't know how long it is going to protect us. You must have heard lots of different opinions. Someone saying that the AstraZeneca viral vector vaccine gives you lifelong protection. Someone saying you need another booster shot of a Pfizer vaccine because they are seeing reinfections in Pfizer and Moderna. But really, I really don't think we have enough data as yet. Okay. Then some people are saying if you mix and match the vaccines, that's also a very good way of protecting yourself even further. So I think there's a lot of hypothesis, there's a lot of good scientific rationale, but I think we need to wait for all the data to come in. And we need to wait for some time because remember, the vaccines have only been out in the market since early this year, technically. So we've got less than 1 year's data at the moment. So unless you start getting 1 and 2 years data of all the vaccines, you will really not know how each vaccine is working. And then it's all speculation and each one is trying to come up with their own scientific hypothesis. But unless you get real world evidence and real world data, all this will only be about various scientific sort of hypotheses and extrapolation of data and what have you. So I just think we need to be patient, but suffice to say that you need to vaccinate yourself with any vaccine that you can have access to. That I think is very important because every one of these vaccines has demonstrated that you can basically mute the impact of infections, that you don't need hospitalization, and or rather you need reduced hospitalization, and in many cases it is asymptomatic. So I think there's enough data. Of course, at the same time, we also know that there is a variation in the immune response from person to person. Some people have a great immune response, others don't. Some people have hardly any immune response. So I think you need to look at all this data in a very, very scientific way. And I think the more we are wait for real world data, the more we will know exactly how each vaccine works. Otherwise, everyone's just experimenting on themselves and with on others, just to because they think this is the way to do it, or that might work, or this might work. Today, I keep telling people, even though we are all so worried about the surging cases, I said what we should be tracking is the number of hospital admissions every day, the number of ICU beds every day which are occupied, and the number of ventilator patients that we are seeing every day. That will give you an understanding of whether we are safe or not. Just saying that, oh, we've had 40,000 cases today reported doesn't mean a thing. Out of those 40,000 cases, how many were hospitalized? If nobody was hospitalized, I think we are in a safe place, because we also know that today this disease is endemic, like the flu. Are we worried about flu? I mean, every year we get flu. Every year we get some viral flu or the other. Are we scared of dying? No. And I know that many of us take flu shots every year to make sure that the flu is not so bad, because sometimes you get a very bad attack of flu. Even this year, I think the US has reported some 60,000 deaths due to common influenza. Now, if you look at flu, what is flu? Flu is the remnant of the Spanish influenza, if you remember, which hit the world 100 years ago. It's become endemic, but it has muted in its virulence. Similarly, I think COVID also is now endemic, and I hope it just loses its virulence, and that it doesn't become so deathly, in its impact. And if we have got vaccines, and if we have got antibody therapies, and if we have got treatments, then I don't think anyone needs to be so scared. When it hit us last year, I don't think we had a vaccine. We didn't have treatments. It just took us by storm, and we didn't know how to deal with it. And that's why today we should be in a better place, even though I must admit the second wave with the Delta variant was very, very nasty. But let's hope that now that we know how to treat the disease, we have many treatments. And that's why I say we should not just be about vaccines. We must also look at treatments. And I'm very excited about these antibody treatments, because they are very targeting when it comes to the virus. And I know that if you give one shot of that antibody treatment, actually you can just get rid of the virus. So you have to catch it before it really invades your body.
Yep.
What is happening is that if you don't reduce the viral load, your body reacts in such a violent way that it causes other problems. You're not dying of the virus, you're dying of the hyperimmune response that your body launches. So I think we are beginning to understand how this virus affects us.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, such a fascinating topic. And in between, when we talked about mRNA, it almost, to the technologists here, they'll probably relate to this. It almost felt like inter-process communication. You're communicating and saying, "Hey, do this for me." And I've heard that mRNA technology has been around for a while and then got suddenly used for vaccines. What do you see as sort of the next level of innovation that mRNA could bring? Could it cure other diseases? Could you send
Yeah, yeah.
messages to the body to do other
In
things?
fact, in fact, mRNA technology was being developed for cancer. And cancers can benefit hugely from mRNA technologies. And even you can use mRNA technologies to really address many rare diseases that basically lack a certain protein. So there are many of these therapies. Today we have enzyme replacement therapies for many, many of these rare diseases. Can that be replaced by mRNA technologies? I'm sure it can. So, between gene editing and mRNA technologies, you're going to see a huge transformation in the way we look at many of these difficult to treat diseases, because it's all about proteins at the end of the day. And if you can actually replace a missing protein, I think that can do wonders to people's lives. So I think those are the kind of things we are looking at. saying that what else can we do with mRNA technology. So I think mRNA technology is very exciting.
Yeah, that's very, very cool. I have so many more questions, but I think I'm supposed to now go to audience questions. So I'm going to be less selfish than I've been so far. And let's go to the first question from Gulzar Azad. Dear Kiran, very exciting to hear about all the innovations that Biocon has been driving. How is the overall biologics and biosimilar capabilities slash landscape in India? Are we at par globally in this area?
Well, Biocon is at par globally because we have the largest portfolio of biosimilars, at least from this part of the country, and we are right up there with all the big biosimilar players. So we are very, very capable and competent in terms of taking on, competition globally. We have a very large presence, and of course, other Indian companies are also trying to get there. So basically, I think we have the skills and the talent pool. We really need to invest in this area. Developing biosimilars is not cheap. Biocon took the big bet and we made those huge investments. Now, other Indian companies also may need to make those big bets. Indian pharma companies are very used to developing generics which are much cheaper to make. To put it into context, to develop a generic drug, it might take you about $1 to $5 million and about 2 years or 3 years to develop. A biosimilar drug takes anywhere between 100 million to $200 million per drug to develop, and it takes 5 to 6 years to develop. So you can see the huge risk you're taking and the huge investment bet you have to make. And so, to be very globally dominant in biosimilars, Indian companies will have to invest in creating these large scale facilities, invest big time in developing biosimilars. So, I'm sure many others who want to look at the success of Biocon and said, we also want to do that. Once they start doing it, I think India can become a very large player in biosimilars. Right now, we are fronting that whole charge from India, but I hope others will also come and join us.
Got it. Thank you. Just for the folks who don't know about biosimilars, do you want to give us a quick blip on
Yeah.
what biosimilars are?
So, biosimilar, as the name suggests, is a drug that is based on a large protein or a molecule, what we call as a large protein molecule. Like, generally, these are antibodies, monoclonal antibodies. Insulin is also considered to be a protein-based therapeutic. And there are many other, drugs that are come under this category of biologic, as we call it. So there's a big difference between a chemically synthesized drug and what we call as a biologic drug. Okay. So a chemically synthesized drug is what we normally refer to as a generic drug, because when you synthesize a product chemically, its molecular weight is very low and you basically are able to make it exact because it's a chemical process. So you know the structure of the chemical, and that's what you get, and that's why it's easy to make it, and that's why it takes much shorter, and you don't have to do clinical trials. But when you make a biologic, it's a protein folds a certain way. Many of these biologics have got other aspects to their structure. You might have pegylation, you might have many other aspects of the structure of the protein which are very complex and very important, because unless you have it in that particular configuration, the protein doesn't do what it's supposed to do. So you need to do that protein characterization, you need to do all that so intently that you actually make sure it is similar to the original biologic product which was developed by a company, say, for instance. So when one company develops a biologic drug, they have a certain process, they use a certain host cell line. And when another company wants to make the same product, there will be some small differences. And that's why it's called a biosimilar and not a bioidentical. So when you call it a biosimilar, basically you're saying there are key attributes to that drug which you must make sure it complies with, and it's absolutely, you can't deviate from those very critical aspects of the protein. But there might be some differences here and there. So now what we were very fortunate was to get an interchangeability label, which really requires not only the drug to be very similar, but you need to do a clinical trial that tells you that whether you use this biosimilar drug or the original drug, the outcome is going to be identical. So what we had to do was we had to do switchability studies, which means that initially you start with two arms where one patient gets the original drug and one patient gets your biosimilar drug. And halfway through the study, you switch. So the patient who was on the original drug now gets the biosimilar drug, and the person who was on the biosimilar drug gets the original drug. And if the data is still the same, then you know that they're interchangeable and they're identical. So they're bio-identical in that sense.
That's actually very cool and much. Those of us who do
And that's why it's so tough.
it's
And
much
that's
harder.
why it's such a big deal to
Yeah.
get the first interchangeable label in the world. I don't think people realize what a big deal it was. They just sort of brushed it off as, oh, some regulatory approval Biocon got. But we who are in this business and who are in this field know what a big deal it was to get the first interchangeable label in the world. So I just thought I'd share that with you.
Thank you so much. That's very cool. We'll take the next question, if you can bring it on the screen. So next question is from Yogesh Kumar. What are some of the structural changes you'd like to see in the Indian health industry? For example, patients continue to believe hospitals and doctors are incentivized to prolong the diagnosis and cure of disease. So what kind of changes are you looking forward to?
So this question is a very important question because you do need to really transform the Indian health system based on very, very good diagnosis. Because if you can actually diagnose early, you can treat early and the outcomes are much better. You can't blame doctors and hospitals for all the things that happen today because often patients come very late in their disease stage, right? Especially when you look at diseases like cancer, they come so late in the day that it's then very difficult to treat, and then it becomes like a chronic therapy which you're just trying to get the patient to live as long as they can. But there are many, many diseases which you can actually arrest right up front. Diabetes is one of them. Everyone knows that if you catch diabetes early, you can actually prevent progression into bad diabetes, right? And diabetes is bad because it actually has a multiple impact on many, many organs. It is actually a disease that actually affects your blood vessels. So because of that, the blood supply to many of your organs gets impacted because of insulin and about how it works, right? And so you can start getting cardiac disease, you can start getting kidney disease, you can start getting neuropathy, your eye vision can get affected. So all these things are what you need to prevent. So if you can catch diabetes early, you must treat it early. Now, the first way of treating diabetes doesn't even require medicine. It just requires proper exercise and diet. That itself can slow down the process of diabetes and even reverse it sometimes. Then if it is a little slightly more advanced, then you need to again be very disciplined about how you manage diabetes. So even if you're on insulin, there's a way of managing insulin therapy. But very often doctors, and patients want a very convenient way out. So they'll say, okay, take 2 units of insulin every mealtime. Now you may not require 2 units of insulin every mealtime. You might have to, measure your insulin and then adjust it accordingly. But titrating your insulin all the time is becoming very difficult. So I'm sure technology today will help patients to actually titrate themselves much better. And there are things called digital therapeutics today, which allow you to do that. So you don't need a doctor all the time. A doctor has to be a person who diagnoses your disease very well. That's what I look for a doctor. I want the doctor to diagnose me clinically as to what is wrong with me. My mother right now is in hospital. She's an elderly person, and I have such implicit faith in the doctor who treats her because he knows exactly clinically what is wrong with her and he knows how to treat it. So I really think a doctor's job is to diagnose, and based on the diagnosis, what is the treatment that the patient should have. I don't think it is the intention of any doctor to prolong the illness because, as you know, even a doctor wants to be, acknowledged for having treated patients and made them better. I don't think any doctor, it's not of compelling self-interest to not see a patient getting better. So I think this notion that a doctor and a hospital prolongs the patient's disease is not correct.
Correct. No, thank you so much, and our best wishes to your mom. Didn't know she was in the hospital. Hopefully, she gets better soon.
Yeah, she is better.
Let's take the next question. This might be the last one. We are about 4 minutes, away from our close today. Priyanka Vora, what is your biggest failure, and what did you learn from it? What's left to achieve after having achieved so much?
I don't even think I can say what was my biggest failure. I've had many failures along the way. And I think each failure has taught me a lot. So, I've had a failure in technology. For instance, when I first developed our proprietary enzyme technology, it didn't work the first time. It took us 6 months to figure why it was not working the way we thought it would work up. We had a lot of scale up issues. That was a big failure because, we were hoping to sell our products from the moment we scaled up that thing. So 6 months delay in for a small company not to be able to sell its product was a big setback for us. But we didn't give up. We said, no, no, there's something wrong. We have to figure it out. And we have to figure out the technology so that once we figure it out, we will be zooming. And that's exactly what happened. Then, of course, there have been other, failures of, maybe I made a wrong investment in a company or something else happened in my business. Those things happen all the time. But you have to understand that failure is part of day to day life. Whether it is personal failure, whether it is business failure, it is bound to happen, right? But I think you have to learn from your failure and you have to not make the same failure again. I mean, you should not repeat the failure. So I think that's what I feel has helped me to become stronger and stronger. And you know I know that as a woman also I've been criticized a lot. Oh, you're not as smart as your male competitors. Look at you. Why are you wasting your time in research? Why are you wasting so much money in biosimilars? I got all that criticism for almost 4 5 years because I told you it takes so long
Yeah.
to develop biosimilars. And all my I was getting trolled by everybody saying you don't know what you're doing, you're wasting everybody's money, your stock price is not moving, why are you wasting so much time on biosimilars, why don't you make generics like all the companies, they are much smarter than you, you're a woman, you don't understand. I got all these gender biased trolls also. But finally, when we succeeded, those same trolls started praising me, saying, "Oh, see, the men should learn from you. You were so gutsy. You were such a risk taker." You see, I think people should stop judging people in this binary way. And people should stop judging people on the basis of gender and other aspects. I really wish people would be fair. I think everybody has an opportunity to succeed. Everybody has an opportunity and must be given the opportunity to build their own stories, their own business models without being judgmental. So I, for one, I've been very thick-skinned about listening to all this criticism. I said, I'm going to do what I think is best for my business. I'm going to do what's best because my conscience is clear. That's the way I think people have to go about it. Otherwise, this social media can ruin everybody's lives.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Shaw. We are unfortunately at the sort of end of our time with you today. Really, really appreciate you taking out time from a busy schedule. Very, very inspiring for me personally, and I'm sure for everybody who's listening. There are tons of questions I can see on my right side here, but unfortunately, we won't be able to take them up today. Thanks again for your time, Mrs. Shaw, and really appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you. And everyone, please stay safe and please get vaccinated if you haven't yet done so.
Thank you.
Thank you.